All right, well, welcome to Cwic Show. In this episode, I'm going to go over my little experience recently at the hospital and some practical and spiritual lessons that I think are very applicable to all of us in what happened over the last 10 days or so. This is about family. This is about really hard decisions. This is about practicality, your own rights and patients' rights. And this is about sticking up for each other. And so, anyway, let me kind of go through what happened here. As many of you know, I've had a number of health issues. I don't talk about this very much, but I'm not a stranger to the hospital. And I've had major surgery, and including emergency major surgery. I think I've gone through, I hate to talk about this, but I think in the last 5, maybe 5.5 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think I've had 4 surgeries, and then I've had probably 4 or 5 visits to the ER in addition to those surgeries, right? And so anyway, there's a lot going on there. My body does not like certain things. That's one of my biggest issues. I have a real issue with food. I think I've brought that up before. Food does not like me. And yet I love food. It's a very one-way relationship. So anyway, excuse me, and excuse my voice, my raspy voice here. I'm hoping that this is going to come back. I don't think that this is some kind of Spencer W. Kimball thing. You know, I think that this will come back. But as I go through this, you'll see why I probably am still suffering a little bit here from my vocal cords and my throat. So early on a Wednesday morning, this is about 2 a.m., I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm kind of gagging and coughing and I feel like there is something in my throat, you know, like a pill, or some people explain it as a gumdrop in your throat. And so I'm not sure what to do. It's like, I got to get this out. And so I do everything from gargle soda to, try to stick my finger down my throat and do whatever I need to do here to try and get this foreign object out of me. Well, the foreign object had already been in me and was in me for a very long time. It wasn't anything that I had swallowed recently. And what that is it's a certain type of blood pressure medication it's in a certain family called an ACE inhibitor. Some of you may know what that is. Benazepril, I think it's lisinopril, or anything that ends with like a pril is in that family. And there's a very small amount of individuals that can't handle this very long. And it's life-threatening. It must be a very small amount because otherwise they wouldn't be selling it. I think it's the most popular family of blood pressure medication. And so I had gone on this back around the time of one of those major surgeries, and maybe 5-6 years ago. And so I stopped at the middle of the night. I had just been at the emergency room about 3 or 4 months ago with another problem. And my wife will attest, I'm not the kind of person, to have to want to go to the emergency room. I just don't do that. Do not do that, and didn't until the last few years. But so what I do is I think, well, this is ridiculous. I was just in there. There's no way I am heading back to the emergency room. But what started happening is I started to have less and less breath, and my throat is closing up, and I'm kind of wheezing in a sense, and my throat is making a strange noise. I can tell by feeling down in my throat that it's swollen up, and there's a problem. And so it's like, my wife, of course, is saying, let's go to the emergency room. We got to go. And I'm like, no, I don't think I want to do that. Let's just sit on the couch for a little bit and decide and just see what happens here for a little while longer. Now, it would be helpful to know this. About 5 years ago, the same thing happened. The problem is I don't know why. And we woke up in the middle of the night, and what we did that night is we decided to find, because again, we didn't want to go to the ER. We decided to find a 24-hour urgent care, and we did. And it may have saved my life. The problem is they didn't tell us what the problem was, or if they did, it didn't register with me. And what they did there is when I got to the urgent care, they hit me with an EpiPen, right? One of those pens you throw into your leg or into your arm, and it's full of adrenaline. It's epinephrine, and that's supposed to help fight against a severe allergic reaction. And so that's what they did when we got there. But I had probably not waited as long, and that did work a little bit. And then they started giving me steroids to bring the swelling down, and that worked. But I walked out of there really not knowing what had just happened, what in the world had just happened, and I didn't follow up on it. I should have, I didn't know what happened. I thought that I had swallowed a pill or something, some foreign object was. I didn't know. And they weren't very helpful with that. So come back to this time around last week, and the same thing starting to happen. And finally, my breath is getting so difficult to produce that it's like, okay, Harlene is my wife, let's go. We're going back again. And so we get in the car. She drives me over there. Now we're probably talking about, 2:30, 2:45, maybe 3 o'clock. And so I walk in. This is so interesting. There had just been a late night 4-car pileup in the area here. And we're really close to the hospital. We're like 2 miles from the hospital. And so the ER is packed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, well, they give you a card to fill out when you get up to the front. And so we walk up, we get to the front. My wife goes to the bathroom, so I grab one of these cards, barely able to breathe, and it says, put down your name, and then what's your problem, and it's just I just put down can't breathe. I can't breathe, and so we hand that back in. My wife comes back out in the lobby, and we go sit down in the chairs. And apparently that's a pretty big deal, right? Obviously. If you're going to write down that you can't breathe, then they're going to see you pretty quickly. Because there were a number of people there in front of us. A lot of people in pain, sick, but probably not life-threatening. And so we walk back, they sit us down, they ask a couple of questions, and they're like, okay, this doesn't sound great. They can hear my voice. They know something's going on. And they decide to run a CAT scan. And so they put me in. I remember this part. They put me in and run me into the CAT scan. and take me back out. Well, what they see in there is that there is no airway left. You can't see an airway. Now, obviously, I'm able to suck some kind of air in at this point, but I'm getting very lightheaded. I'm laying there in the bed, and there's two people there, a man and a woman. They're ER docs, maybe a nurse practitioner. And they say to me, we think we have to get a breathing tube down you immediately. Because if we don't do it right now, we don't think we're going to be able to get it down there. But then this is their exact words. They said, but it's going to hurt like hell. And we have the anesthesiologist right here, right, ready to roll. But we can't wait for the medicine really to take effect. We'll do everything we can, but we have to do this now. And so what do? Right? And my wife's not with me in the room. I like to make those kind of decisions with her, but I think it's probably better that she wasn't in there because of what has to happen right here at this point. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, and I'm a pretty logical type of a person. Well, that seems logical to me. Okay, I'm not going to be able to breathe at all. It's likely going to close up, or I've got to get a breathing tube down, but it's going to be a horrific experience, and it was. And so I remember this because I'm still semi-coherent. And I think that they had to ask me this, right? I think they had to get my consent because I was coherent. I'm still coherent at this point. And so, I said, yes. Okay. What do you do in this moment? And so they take that thing and they had injected me with something and had me now on an IV, got an IV started up but I'm still awake. And they take this thing and they just shove it down my throat, which was not an easy experience. And that would not be an easy experience at any time. But when there's nothing left there's no air passage left. It's not a pleasant experience. And because I am fighting with everything I have to stop them from putting this down my throat. And so here now I'm out, right? And so they keep the IV running, and eventually I'm running out of consciousness at this point. And so my wife then sees me at this point, and here I am now. I'm semi-coherent. I don't know at this point, but I am sedated. I'm intubated, and I stayed that way for the next 4 days. Right. And so what is my wife going to do? What is my wife going to do at this point? Well, she did, and excuse my French here, she did a hell of a lot. And pretty amazing, really. So the following day, so the following morning, if you will, and then later in that day, they have an ENT on staff there at the hospital who comes in. And this guy comes in guns blazing. We thought something different about this person. It was not the case. This was not a good experience for my wife. And I, again, for me, we like to make those decisions together. And I wasn't there to able to support her, which is very frustrating. But what am I going to do, right? There's nothing that can be done at that point for me. But you want to, there's a natural need to want to defer to the experts. And so this guy comes in, and here's what he tells my wife. On 3 occasions, he reminds her of this. I had a cancer patient, he says, that was slotted for this time. And they got bumped because I have to now help you. How does that make you feel? Right? That's what he comes in with, and mentions it to my wife 3 times. And then says, we need to do a tracheotomy. Now, a tracheotomy, right? That's where they go in here down at the lower throat. They open that up. You can't speak when they do this. You cannot speak for 10 weeks. And after the 10 weeks, you go almost a year speaking with a voice box. Imagine me. I mean, I'm very happy with a raspy voice here compared to that, right? Imagine me in this with this podcast having to do that. It's just not going to. That would not happen. But for anybody to have to think you're going to have to go through that. So that's the easy thing to do, though, right? You want to defer to that authority. You want to defer because it's like, okay, well, these people know what they're doing. This is the right thing to do. That's kind of what you're taught in many ways. But the experience was so horrible for my wife. She could not believe what this guy was saying and what he was pushing for. And she stood her ground. She stood her ground. And because she stood her ground with this guy, the nurses and the other doctors, like ICU doctors and ER doctors and others, came around also and basically said, they ended up coming back and apologizing and saying, for that doctor, we are so sorry that this happened. And this was not the right thing to have happened. We're really sorry about all of this. And so then she starts to get a little bit of support. But if she would have just caved, right, I'd be looking right now probably at having that operation having been done already. The other thing that happened, and I want you to think about that for a minute, how important that is to have an advocate, right? It is that there is nobody that knows me better, that knows my health better. There is no one that knows my mind, my potential for recovery, what I do for exercise, and and what I do for a living. There's nobody who knows me better and who loves me more than my wife. And I think about that, and it's like, what authority was deferred to here? Right? What authority was deferred to? That was the authority of a spouse. And that was the authority of my wife that was deferred to for that. And that is the higher authority here, obviously. And she did what needed to be done in that moment. She saved me from some bad stuff here, really bad stuff that could have happened. And how could I ever have blamed her if she would have just rolled over and said, well, this is what they said to do. So that's one practical thing there, and a spiritual thing I think that you look at is obviously Christ is the advocate for each of us, and he knows us better than anybody else, and he loves us more than anybody else, and he's there as an advocate for us. And so I had that, right? I had that in addition to the Savior, which I'll get to in a minute. I had my spouse, I had my wife, who is there for me. Thank goodness. And I'm just so grateful to her for how she acted and what she did and how she was looking out for me, right? And so then secondarily to that, and here's a great thing to have and both spiritual and practical, is that my best friend is in the healthcare industry, and he this is what he does. He knows hospitals very, very well. And so as they were waiting and waiting and waiting to see if something is going to happen with my throat, because it took 4 days. The questions would be things like, well, they want to push now for a CT scan 3 days later, and the problem with that is if the swelling hasn't gone down enough, they're going to have to operate. They're going to have to go through the surgery. But then she thought, well, what if we could wait one more day? And so her question to my friend was, if I want to wait another day before we get the CAT scan to see if the swelling has gone down enough, can I make them do that? Right? Do I have the ability to do that? And you don't know, right? You may not think about that. You may not know. And the answer is yes. You have the right to be able to ask for that and to demand that. So my wife does. And she waits, and you can only go so long being sedated for that long, and being on, by the way, I'm on a breathing machine too with all of this, because if you go too long with all of that, first of all, I can tell you, having gone through triple bypass surgery at the age of 50, and going through what I went through with this. As far as trauma goes, not recovery time or anything, but as far as trauma goes, this was worse. This was worse because of how long I was sedated, in and out of sedation. And what they have to do is they have to balance this. So it's like, well, we can't let him totally go into sedation and we can't keep him on the breathing machine the whole time, because we have to allow his lungs to work. And we have to allow him to be able to come out of this. And because if you shut everything down through full sedation, the ability to pull you out of that gets harder and harder the longer you're under, right? And your ability for your muscles and everything to come back, it's much more difficult to do that. So my wife makes the decision, and the proper decision, to push off another day and ask for that. That's going back to the same doctor and saying, we're waiting another day. Now, again, at this point, we had additional advocates. My wife had basically gotten the advocates of the ICU doctors and the nurses and others on all of this. And so they know what's happened here. They know the exchange that happened with this doctor at the hospital. And so she's got this. And so, we've got a team of people here now that are on our side and hoping that things are going to work out. The other thing I want to bring up here, oh, by the way, so in other words, it's nice to have a friend who specializes in what you need and that can be there to support you and your family when that comes up. And so that was a really nice practical thing to have. And again, just another advocate with knowledge and competence that was able to help us. And so then, my wife is there with me every day during visiting hours. Where, this whole COVID thing, the visiting hours are reduced. She has to go home in the evening. You can't come in early, and you can only have one person that can ever come in during a day. Well, I mean, my wife is waiting to see what is going to happen with me. And so she's not going to give that up to, I've got kids that live near here and others that she's not going to give that up. Of course, I don't want her to. And so she's got to be the one that's going to be there every day with me. And so nobody else can come in. And so she's by herself. So it was what I'm trying to get at as far as our family goes, of those that are actually right there at the hospital, which is not easy. And she decides to wait that extra day. So now we're 4 days out from Saturday. We're let me make sure I have this right. Thursday, Friday. So we're 3.5 days. We're 3.5 days of being in the ICU at this point. They come and they grab the CT scan. My wife is making sure that we're waiting as long as possible on the CT scan, right? She wants to wait until Saturday morning, later Saturday morning, for this to happen, and not early in the morning. She wants as much time before that my throat swelling to go down, right? Because I've got all these steroids in me pumping, trying to fight off this anaphylactic shock that my body has gone into. And so she talks to the nurses. Again, it's like, who's going to do this? Who's going to be the one doing it? Oh, well, I'm the one who does that. Can you make sure you do it at this hour? I can maybe do that. I get off at 7 a.m. What time, can you do this at 6:30? Is that when you can run it? So she's watching over this the whole time. And sure enough, this is when it gets done, right? She's off shift at 7 o'clock. It's done at 6:30 a.m. And because I had been in the hospital, I think it's 4 months ago, they actually had a CAT scan to compare to of normal breathing of my throat. And so they can go to that and then go to the one on that Saturday morning, and it's like, oh, this looks almost the same. It's almost normal. And so they could compare those two. And so the doctor had my wife take a picture on her phone of the two of these CAT scans so that we could look at them and she can look at them. And so they decide, okay, this swelling has gone down enough. It looks pretty good. Let's see. Let's go ahead and take out the breathing tube and see what happens on this. But they kept me in the ICU for the remainder of that day and up through the night. And it looked like everything was going to be okay. So they moved me into the hospital, and I stayed there another 3 days. My wife was there, and she was watching over me the whole time and making sure that these things were happening properly. And I just think that the both the practical and the spiritual lessons of this are, I have a family. I have a family, and I know not everybody is in that fortunate of a position. I know many people who are not, but I am. I am in a position where I'm very, very fortunate, where I made certain decisions and had certain things go my way, and where I have a spouse and children that love me very, very much, and an extended family of siblings and parents that love me very much. And that support system was everything. It was everything to me. I feel so grateful for that. I feel so grateful in a moment like that to have, those moments of crisis, those moments of great love, those moments of opposition, those moments of the greatest joy. You can pick only a few of those that really rise to these types of heights. And everything else is kind of like, well, how are we spending our time together, and how are we building our relationship? And you have ups and you have downs and all these other things. But man, when the rubber hits the road, I think there's a lot to say about what you have in place in those few moments of crisis, opposition, and joy. All those moments that you can share and be there for each other. And then lastly, my point is just on prayer, and I am so grateful to everyone who thought about our family. There were other podcasts and YouTube channels that had put out a call for prayer on our behalf and for me and for my family. And, I believe in prayer. I believe in prayer. Like the sacrificial atonement. It's something that is outside of ourselves. We or others, our advocates, are going outside of ourselves and drawing on a power, an otherly power. I believe in that. I believe that is as real as anything there is. And that will, that love, that sacrifice, that effort, I believe in that. I believe that is true. And that's not to say that things couldn't have gone really bad, even if there was prayer. Prayer is not always going to remove things. But I believe that when we have prayer in place, that it is something that helps right the course, whatever that course might be, for better or for worse. And it helps right the course of intervention and the will of the Lord, allowing us to advocate for each other. And I really appreciate that. That was overwhelming to me, to know about all of that, and a ward family, and to have that, and people praying for you, and a bishop that came and gave me a blessing, and there's something to that, guys. There is something to all of that, and I'm very grateful for that. Hopefully my voice is going to come back, and I won't keep this raspiness for too long. It's hard for me to talk for very long, but without starting to get not how to lose my voice. But thank you very much if you've reached out, and thank you for following here. I'm sorry that we didn't post anything for a while. We'll catch up on our content here quickly, as long as the voice thing works out, and I'm pretty sure everything's going to be fine there. I think we're going to see a lot of content coming through this year on this channel. The gospel's true. That law of advocacy is true. Whether it's the Savior, whether it's someone else on your behalf.